What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is the Bad Batch Season 3, episodes 11 through 15, the final episodes of Season 3 and the series as a whole. Pretty solid wrap-up. So, don't want to get too caught up in talking about what happens at the end, because I'm going to take this episode by episode. So first, episode 11, Point of No Return. I liked it for the most part, because this is something I was kind of expecting to see since Season 2, since they got introduced to this island and this paradise where everybody's living, and I had the idea of, could this be our forever home type of thing? I had this thought that, yeah, there's probably going to be a point when the Empire shows up and attacks it. Now, I wasn't really sure exactly how that was going to work. I wasn't sure if it was going to really be destroyed, because it did feel like kind of a nice place to go at the end of all of it. So I felt like if they destroyed it, that would kind of take that away as a possible ending for the group. It was very up in the air for me. So whenever the assassin, the operative, shows up to try to capture them and starts destroying buildings and taking people captive, it was very intense because I really didn't know what to expect. But I will say the fact that Omega decides to turn herself in, at the moment I did like it. In this episode, I did like it because it did feel necessary for Omega to sacrifice herself to save all of these people and their livelihoods. So I think that was a good decision. I think it was a very mature decision from her as well. Overall, it was a pretty fun episode, just seeing how everybody's trying to essentially stay alive and stay hidden through all of this. And leading to Omega's capture is a good setup for the final 4 episodes, because now the team's going to have to go rescue her again. But now it feels a lot more like the team is going to rescue her. And that's why episode 12, Juggernaut, is probably my least favorite of this season, because it feels repetitive. Because it's not just the team is trying to find a way to go get her, like we had at the beginning of the season. It's also Omega's looking for a way out, and she's finding ways out. It feels too similar, you know? Like, it should have been, when Hemlock gets her back, he should have basically kept her under lock and key and under constant surveillance with no chance of escape. But he doesn't do that. He just puts her in a room with these scientists that are overlooking her, but they're not like guards. They're just scientists that are watching and observing, and they don't even do their jobs that well. It just feels like this was Hemlock being an idiot for the sake of the plot, so that way it can move along. It doesn't ruin anything for me, but it definitely is a leap in logic that the show takes. That was a little frustrating, because it didn't feel like somebody with the intelligence that Hemlock seemingly possesses. It doesn't feel like a mistake he would make again. Because the first time she was there, he gave her way too much just freedom, basically. And also just way too much interaction with Nala Se. And now he's giving her way too much interaction with Emery. And I don't know, if she's already convinced one person to help her in your mind, why would you let her get close to somebody else? Why would you not be overseeing this, or have somebody that you absolutely trust watching her every move? It just feels like it's too easy for Omega to once again come up with a plan to get everybody, all the kids, out of there. Come on, you know, like, just let the team, let the Bad Batch do their job this time. Let them be the heroes this time, because you already had Omega save herself earlier this season. Why do we gotta do it again? So it was a nitpick for sure, but the rest of episode 12 was kind of interesting because it involves the team going to get Rampart, and it is kind of funny to see him just working in the mines. There's something about this guy who was so high and mighty in the first season and part of the second season. I actually don't even remember if he showed up for the second season or not. Season 1 and 2 kind of blend together in my mind now, because it's been a while since I watched him. But yeah, seeing him just be basically a prisoner is kind of funny. But using him, I think, is a good idea. It's pretty clever from Crosshair and from the team. And that leads to episode 13, Into the Breach. And this one is just kind of a continuation of where everything was in episode 12. We see the team working with Rampart, trying to find a way to get to Tanta's base. We see Omega getting to know the kids a little bit more and formulating her plan. And it was okay, but it definitely felt kind of the most filler of these 5, because first and second episode, it feels like steps were being taken. Third one, it kind of felt like, yes, there were steps being taken, but it was a more continuation of last episode. It isn't until episode 4 that things really start to kick off a little bit and stuff really starts to happen. So all in all, it's the one that I'm having the most trouble remembering the details of, to be honest. I do remember the team being on some sort of Imperial base that they managed to get the information that they need by pretending to be Rampart's security detail, and then they attach themselves to the ship, which that scene was actually, it was memorable because it was kind of cool how they showed it with Echo trying to do stuff on the ship to cloak the incoming ship that Hunter is flying and trying to connect to the bottom of the ship before it goes into hyperspace. The way they went back and forth between it all to show the ticking clock and how close it was, that was kind of entertaining, but everything else about it is already kind of out of my mind, to be honest. And then episode 14, Flash Strike. This one feels like the final mission is happening. It definitely has a final mission kind of feel to it, which did leave me a little concerned because I didn't know what the fate of all these characters were going to be. It's one of those things where I knew this was the final season, so I knew what I was getting myself into watching this final season. There's a good chance that maybe not everybody makes it. And considering the fact, I mean, I almost half expected Tech to show up this season because I'm thinking, no, there's no way they would just kill off one of the main characters and not bring him back. When he fell from a high height, we've seen characters survive falls from heights before in Star Wars. It's bound to be okay. So the fact that he didn't bring him back, by the 14th episode, I'm thinking, okay, so he is definitely dead, which means all of these characters could be gone at the end of this season. And that did make episode 14 and 15 very nerve-wracking in some aspects, because I did have a feeling that I felt like Omega would be okay, but the rest of the Bad Batch, I didn't think they would kill off Hunter, or if they did, they wouldn't kill off Crosshairs and Wrecker. I felt all these different combinations of who could possibly die in this group. And so every scene with them, when the beast attacks them in the forest, and when they're trying to make their way into the base and they're getting shot at, and Omega's in there and Echo's in there trying to sneak himself around. I mean, there were just so many moments that felt extra tense because I wasn't entirely sure whether everybody was going to make it or not. And that's something that I can't always say that I feel whenever I'm watching kid shows, but Star Wars they've found a way to do it, especially when I look at Clone Wars, when I look at Rebels and this show. There is a feeling that not everything is going to be okay. Clone Wars was probably the cheeriest of all the shows because it was set in a time when it is a wartime. So there were darker moments, but also they were on technically the winning side of the war. Like, things were going in their favor for the most part. They were the good guys in the war. But Rebels was set in a very dark time whenever the Empire's in full control and they're trying to rise up against it. And this is set in a very dark time when their kind is basically shunned and outcast because if they're not working for the Empire, they are basically traitors. And so they're constantly on the run. So it adds this extra element that I really have to appreciate that the writers gave to a show like this that, again, probably a lot of adults are not going to be watching because of the animation. So it is going to be seen more as a kid's show. But they do a lot of very good mature themes in these shows that I feel like more people should be experiencing personally. But anyways, as far as episode 14 is concerned, though, it's one of those, I'm trying to keep 14 and 15 separate because it does feel like one just long episode between the two of them. But yeah, the 14 is more of the infiltration into the base. 15 is where things do start to kick off a little bit more, and we see the intensity of the situation rise. And I gotta say, for episode 15, the cavalry has arrived. I was impressed, not just with how exciting the action was. It was a little maybe too cheery of an ending for what this show. It's funny because it was both darker and also sappier than I was expecting in some ways. On the sappy side of things, which admittedly is the stuff that I was not as much of a fan of. I mean, I'm glad everybody made it out okay, outside of Nala Se, of course, but I was glad like the main Bad Batch and Omega made it out okay along with the kids, because yeah, I like these characters fine, but like I've said before, they're not the most interesting. Like, they are kind of archetypes of characters, so they weren't really ones that grabbed my interest. I cared about them and I wanted to see them okay, but it was not on the same level that I connected with like Ezra and Hera and Sabine, all of those guys in Rebels. Like they were interesting characters that were well written and had some complexity. These guys, they're okay. They're not terribly written. It's not like they're simple beings, but there's just not that same level of complexity, at least for me. Yeah, the fact that though they all made it out okay and they all got to live on this island happily ever after, it was definitely not the path that I was expecting the show to take after how dark most of these 3 seasons have been. I really didn't think that it was just going to be like, yeah, everybody's good and we're all living happy. Obviously, Tech's gone still, but we're all happy outside of that. It did feel a little sappy to me. Maybe that's just me. Maybe some people prefer the sappiness after all the darkness, but it doesn't match a lot of the rest of the show for me, at least for the most part. I mean, I know obviously there were some episodes where everybody made it out okay when they probably shouldn't have. It still does feel like this was a big mission, and a lot of people felt like they were throwing themselves into situations that felt like sacrifices, and then they didn't die. Something about that feels weird to me, and it does make it feel a lot more like a kid's show than the rest of the series has felt. But that's where the elements of it that were darker than I was expecting had a lot to do with how the bad guys were killed. Because, yeah, there was a lot of death in this final episode. Not complaining about it. It was just very shocking to watch some of these deaths. Like just when they released the, I don't remember what it's called now. I'm thinking Zillow Beast, but then that just makes me think of a beast that goes around selling houses to people. So maybe that's right, but I don't know. But when they release it, I mean, that thing just destroys the facility. And it eats one guy, smacks one guy. It just squashes this one dude. That one was so sudden, it almost made me laugh because it was just 3 guys, shoot it, and it's gone, done. On top of that, you've got Rampart's death, which was, I was shocked to see them actually show him standing as the explosions happened around him. Like that was on the same level of like Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, whenever they killed off what's his name, Commodore whatever, at the end of the movie, and you just see him walking as everything's just being destroyed around him, and then he just blows up. And Pirates is kind of, it's a Disney movie. It's not necessarily a kid's film, but it is more of a family film, to be perfectly honest. So to have a character die like that, I just remember as a kid watching it going, whoa. And Rampart's death kind of had the same feel. It's just him shooting Nala Se in cold blood was basically a regression of his character that we had seen up until that point. Because, not that he was suddenly like, oh yeah, I'm going to help you guys, but it felt like this was a chance to maybe see him realize that he's been betrayed by the Empire and realize this is his second chance. And he never did. It felt like he was always just in it for himself, trying to get out of all these situations for himself and thinking selfishly. And so in this one moment, he sees an opportunity to help the Emperor, to help himself, even though it would obviously backfire on him because the Emperor doesn't care about him, but he tries it and then he dies. And I don't know, something about that does seem kind of justified, but at the same time, it does feel like there was a missed opportunity with Rampart's character. But then again, we've seen other Imperial officers turn their back on the Empire before. I can't remember the name of the guy in Rebels now, but we did see that guy turn his back on the Empire. So maybe it would have felt a little too similar if they did it with Rampart as well. But yeah, that scene was kind of badass from Nala Se, though, just to see her basically going into that lab knowing she was about to blow it up. And the Rampart steps in like, I'm taking this all for myself. She's like, no, it's always going to be Kaminoan. Goodbye. It's just, it was kind of funny. And then Hemlock's death was, I wasn't sure what to expect with him because, again, knowing that Palpatine does get cloned later, I kind of thought he was going to at least partially succeed in his plans, not fully succeed, because if so, then essentially you just have a bunch of Palpatine clones running everything and they would never lose. But in my mind, I'm thinking, well, he did live at least long enough for the sequels, so maybe they got one clone finished. And maybe that's where, that one little vial of Omega's blood that they had, maybe it was just enough to create one clone of him. So to see that not only does all his research get blown up, but he also just dies in this episode, I was a little surprised by it. I mean, it was a great moment for Hunter and Crosshairs to work together, and also Omega to give Crosshairs the opportunity to hit that shot. And I will say, we didn't ever really get much of a conclusion for his hand shaking. It just felt like in that final moment, he hit his shot, and that's all you needed. But yeah, they absolutely just went to town on him after that. Just so many shots hit him. I'm like, okay, guys, he's dead. He's dead. Oh my God, he's dead. And then he just falls off. I'm like, okay, well, if he survives that, he is made of some stern stuff, let me tell you. But yeah, it was, in that respect, it was a much darker episode than what I was expecting. But yeah, the ending, like I said before, it was sappy. Some people may like it. I don't know. I'm kind of mixed on it. Maybe the more I think about it, the more I'll be happy with what they did with it. And who knows, maybe we'll see some of these characters in the future, and that'll be fun to see them again. I really kind of hope that we see a little bit more of Omega going forward, knowing that she was going to be a rebel pilot. I am finding her character a little bit more interesting as the season went along. And by the end of it, I wouldn't say she's on the same level of like Emery. I still think Emery was a very intriguing character, and maybe her turn was a little quick, but to me, that's because they didn't have as much time to spend on her. I think episode 10 was a good showing of her sort of descent from, I'm following Hemlock's orders because of my love for science and because I want to study and do all of this stuff. We saw that descent as she started to realize just how messed up some of these experiments were and how it affected her. And so we couldn't really have more of that, because then we'd have to take time away from our main characters to spend showing more and more how she slowly turned and changed her mind from helping him. And they didn't have time to do that. So I kind of understand why that had to be a sudden, like, she finds Echo in the laboratory and she's like, hey, you're Echo, right? I want to help get Omega out of here. It's like, oh, well, that was sudden. It felt like a complete 180 from the last time we saw you. Yeah, all in all, though, it was a fun series. It was a fun final season. I enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it's as good as Clone Wars or as good as Rebels. For the most part, I mean, I wasn't really expecting much, to be honest, from this show, because the Bad Batch, when I saw them in Clone Wars, I think I've said this before, but I thought they were okay. I was kind of interested to see a bit more of them. They were kind of funny in the one episode, but I wasn't sure how they were going to last more than one episode. I wasn't sure how it was going to stretch out over a full season. And what they did with it for that concept, I thought they did a good job. I think overall, solid series, solid final season, solid final 5 episodes. I had a good time. I think that's about it. But going forward, we'll see what happens with Star Wars as far as these animated shows are concerned. I kind of hope this is not the last animated show, because so far I've not really heard about any future plans for animated series. I know they have a Ahsoka season 2 coming. I heard there's going to be a Mandalorian and Grogu movie, but I've not heard any plans for future animated series in the vein of what we've seen with like Rebels, Clone Wars, Bad Batch. I don't think there's anything planned for that, but I also haven't looked that far into it, so maybe there is. I feel like there's a lot of questions, though, when you talk about like the M count that they were looking into. Some of the clone stuff can still be looked into as far as where they went from here to Rebels, because we did see like Rex and I don't remember who the other 2 guys that were with him were, but what their story is and how they ended up being the last clone troopers, what happened to the rest of them along the way. Again, I feel like Omega's story can continue as well as Emery's. I think Emery could be a really interesting character going forward if they decide to pursue her story more. Who knows? We'll see what they decide to do next. But as far as this series, let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on this series as a whole, this final season, this final 5 episodes? Let me know down in the comment section. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Star Wars reviews whenever I get back to it. But until next time, I hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to you all later. Peace out.